This is about the man who built Nebraska football.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here. Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. I want to thank the folks from FanDuel. I'm going to throw it back to Mark Onwater. I'll let him tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook.
Thanks, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by FanDuel. With the NBA playoffs going on, now is the perfect time to give FanDuel a shot. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Now, FanDuel always has great promotions every day. They've got a safe and secure app, and you can get payouts instantly. No waiting for your money to show up. There's no better place. Bet all the playoff action in America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. DP, back to you.
Welcome back. Thank you, Mark. Greatly appreciate it. I want to, again, thank the folks from FanDuel, and thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Thank you for your everydayers and you folks have subscribed. The subscription numbers are going up. Thank you. You're much appreciated. If you have not, take a moment, pause the video, and hit the subscribe button. Greatly appreciate it. We're trying to get more followers on this thing as well. The man who built Nebraska football. And there are a couple of things that I want to address in this. Just kind of reminder of who that man is and why it was important. And then there's another phase to this. When you think of Nebraska football, Huskers, Herbie, there's certain names that come to mind. Most folks know the history and can recall Bug Eaters as a part of this. But in the final couple of segments, we want to get on firmly on top of this thing that there's another name that isn't often talked about when it comes to Nebraska football. And we'll go back to the days of, the YMCA and playing the Omaha YMCA and, games against Iowa early on back in the late 1800s. But there's a name that just kind of drew my attention. Actually, there were a couple, and we'll go over those in the course of the later show. But the man that built Nebraska, and I saw it in an article, and it makes you deep dive into some of the history of that, and then you have to go back and relearn or reconsider Nebraska football back at its beginning and in its origins of YMCA football. On campus, intramural, then YMCA, then games outside of the state, because there were games within the state. If you go back to 1890, which if you're a Husker fan, that number resonates with you because it's now a part of the NIL discussion narrative and drive, the 1890 coalition. And that was their homage to Nebraska and its football origins. But what we wanted to get into was in this article, it said, to the man that built Nebraska, George Flippin, who at the time was one of 5 African Americans who played in big-time college football, who were allowed to play college football, and the others were in the Ivy League and then Michigan. So it's pretty deep water to find yourself in the late 1890s, in the early 1890s. Pretty amazing. And that Flippin was responsible and given credit for building the Nebraska football program from the ground up. And its style of play, the players, it goes back to its origins of, a music teacher being its first coach. And basically it was because he was the only one with the football. And with that, I don't think he stayed with the program long and being a music teacher. I think he went back to Boston, went back to Harvard. And then a coach that came in who was also a player And anytime there are player coaches, we know that there's some friction over ownership and direction and conflict of interest, personal interest being a part of it as well. Flippin being, I'm not sure if he's Nebraska's first African American All-American or the first All-American, because you have to go back to the duration of sports in that era, official sports. And each school and the NCAA have their own definitions of who was the first, because what makes it an official sport in the NCAA. So we'll investigate that and we'll address it in future episodes. But I'm pondering that. Does that mean that he was the first All-American, official All-American? Was he the first official African-American All-American? And then there are tons of reports, and we were jumping around on the internet looking at reports, and they spoke of Colorado and Iowa and Illinois fan bases, student sections, and student bodies having conversations about Flippin being the best player on the team and what a force he was. And then that led us to some conflict, because there were some schools that would not play Nebraska because Flippin played in the game, and they weren't prepared to play against an African-American player, whether from Nebraska or otherwise. And then conflicts between who would the person who would become head coach and George Flippin. So anytime a coach comes in and there's a substantial figure in place, he has to figure out either are they with me or against me? And in this case, chose that he was against them, against Flippin, and that Flippin would be against him. And Flippin was named captain, voted by the team, and the coach didn't agree with it and went public over some comments and said, "Geez, well, he's all brute. Be a captain, you need to have brains." And Flippin is all brute. At 5'11" and 200 pounds in the 1890s, considered a brute of a man. I find it interesting. But it's a part of Nebraska football and a part of Nebraska history that I think deserves some more cover and some more conversation. There are some great pictures of George Flippin. There's been some honoring of George Flippin over the course of the last few years in Nebraska, decals on the helmet, etc. I think if it were me, I would go back. If you go back and you just Google George Flippin and see pictures of him in those really cool Nebraska football sweaters that they wore back in the day, I would be first in line to buy one. Like, if they ever recreated those, I could see a stadium filled at Memorial Stadium with those sweaters. Like that's an easy sell. That's an easy sell. So I think if Nebraska, here's a free $1 million idea, bring back those sweaters. As a matter of fact, bring them back on campus. Bring them back on campus. Like, give them to football players. Like, I saw some cream-colored warm-ups that they debuted and premiered during the spring game that were amazing looking. And the original colors, the scarlet and cream, not the red and white, but the scarlet and cream, fit those sweaters and fit those uniforms. And in tribute, I saw the players that did their walk-in with the warm-ups, but I'm kind of getting goosebumps at the idea of them in a tribute having those sweaters as a part with slacks as a part of the walk-in. And they're honoring those 1890 Huskers, or Nebraska football at the time, Old Gold Knights, tree planters, which is another name we'll talk about later. That would be the right way to honor them and have discussions and take history back so people know more about George Flippin and that era of Nebraska football, because it's worth talking about. With the break, we'll come back. We'll go through a little bit of the history of those nicknames, and we'll talk more about George Flippin, because what he went through, what he did for Nebraska, what he did for Nebraska football, what he did for the community, and then what he did for all of us. We wouldn't be where we are without him. Welcome back to Locked On Huskers. Thank you again for hanging out with us each and every single day, making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Today, we're talking about nicknames. We're talking about the origins of Nebraska football. And we're talking about Dr. George Flippin, one of Nebraska's greats, foundation builder, one of the founding bricks of Nebraska football in its fullest form. And talking about it, look, you have to go back in time. He was inducted into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame in 1974. I'll ask the question of why it took 70 years for him to be in the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. Wow. He was, in fact, the first black player on the team, among the first 5 black players nationwide. Originally, his father was a freed slave, his father fought in the Civil War in the 14th U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment. Then he became a doctor. Flippin attended Nebraska from 1891 to 1894. Don't think of 1891 football as you would 2023 football. They weren't the same sport. They didn't have the same following. They didn't have the same push or same cachet. Nebraska's football team at that point had only existed a few months when Flippin arrived on campus. He played for the Huskers in 1891, as they were called the Old Gold Knights football team. That was the name that they first did. And their first game that year against the Iowa Hawkeyes was the 5th game in Nebraska's history. 5th game, period. That's it. He was talented, quickly became the star of the team. His presence on the Nebraska team, because of his presence on the team, Missouri refused to play. And this is in November of 1892. They forfeited the game and said they'd rather not play. Nebraska student newspaper stood up for it, and it became a big story. Flippin continued to play. He was denied entrance to different places throughout the West. But he worked forward anyway and became a surgeon. He was first inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1974. I think you have to take a moment and just honor the man for going through it, because it's hard enough just being a student at the University of Nebraska. It's hard enough being a football player at the University of Nebraska. It's hard to do both, and it's complicated when you add other things to it. So for George Flippin to excel, and then to excel beyond that and becoming a surgeon, well done, Dr. George Flippin. Nebraska football honors you. I honor you. That's an important thing. The Old Gold Knights. That's pretty interesting. Most people think, and they go through recent years of Herbie Husker, and there are several other mascots, and we'll, in the last segment, we'll get into the range of Husker mascots. But the actual nicknames that they went by, and again, back in 1891, they were the Nebraska Old Gold, the Old Gold Knights, which was interesting because the colors were still scarlet and cream. So that's a little strange. But before that, they were the Nebraskans, the Tree Planters, before they were the Old Gold Knights. They were also the Rattlesnake Boys. And I asked the question, and you guys can put it in the comments, but are there rattlesnakes in Nebraska? I don't know. Then there was a name given to the team in the 1890s that managed to last until the 1900s, until 1900. So it was the Bug Eaters. And so with the new name, the Bug Eaters, the team would not help only the university, but Nebraska as a whole. Under this name, the Bug Eaters would help promote football tradition in Nebraska and serve as a symbol of future Cornhuskers for the next couple of decades. The Bug Eaters were big. It's a big deal. I'm intrigued. The Nebraskans could have been simple and long with long history and long game. That would have been okay by me. A little simple, a little too simple. The Nebraskans. But okay, the Bug Eaters. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to y'all on this. What's your feeling on Bug Eaters? Like, would you wear that Bug Eater? Would you wear that on your shirt, on your jacket, Bug Eater? I don't know that you wouldn't, but the tree planters, Arbor Day. Fight for it's yours, man. The Rattlesnake Boys. I would have thought that if in the Midwest Plains back in the 1800s, I don't know that there were rattlesnakes in Nebraska. I don't. Again, I'll take your information here. I love that. And the Cornhuskers evolution to just Huskers for simplicity's sake. But the name that resonates with me the most, and I'm just fascinated by it. So walk with me here. There was at least one game in Nebraska football history where the official nickname of the football team was the Man-Killing Mastodons. The Man-Killing Mastodons of Nebraska. Now, before you ask the other question that I asked about rattlesnakes, there was, in fact, a found mastodon bone in Nebraska. As a matter of fact, it's fully represented on campus currently. Mastodons are very familiar in this area. So if that is so, if that is true, bring me the person who decided to go from whatever they were or before that to the Man-Killing Mastodons. Give him a raise and a statue, and then fire the person who changed the Husker nickname from the Man-Killing Mastodons to whatever they chose after that. Because think about it. If you went from the Man-Killing Mastodons to the Bug Eaters, fail. It's a fail. It's an absolute fail. The Man-Killing Mastodons. I have a sneaky suspicion that there will be a drive for Man-Killing Mastodon shirts coming soon. If we have to do them ourselves, I think we just have to bite the bullet and become home of the Man-Killing Mastodons. I think it's just necessary. I think it's glorious. Don't go anywhere. We're going to come back and close out this episode of Locked On Huskers. My goodness. Hey, gang, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. I was just informed that the first Nebraska Football Hall of Fame induction class was 1971. If Flippin went in 74, it took 4 cycles for him to get in. I'll leave that to the powers that be to have that discussion about why that was. Bob Devaney, I'm told, was put in and inducted before he was done coaching, but again, national titles will do that as well. And there was some legacy in place at that time. There were some Huskers that had success. I would dare say none of them had to go through what George Flippin had to go through, but that's just me. A couple of things on the origin before we get out of here. Again, before 1900, the teams were known also as the Old Gold Knights, the Antelopes, Rattlesnake Boys, and the Bug Eaters. Its first 2 seasons, they competed as the Old Gold Knights. But beginning in 1892, they adopted scarlet and cream as its colors, and then accepted the Bug Eaters as its most popular nickname until the turn of the century. So all those names, again, the Man-Killing Mastodons, all those things in play. The Bug Eaters were named after bull bats. that hovered over the plains, and the Bug Eaters found their prey in the Midwest, enjoying winning campaigns every year of the 1890s until a disappointing season in 1899. After its first losing season in a decade, must have seen only failing that Nebraska moved in a new direction. Charles Cy Sherman, who was the game national renowned as a sports editor for Lincoln Star and helped originate the Associated Press poll, provided a nickname that has gained fame for a century. Sherman, tired of referring to Nebraska teams with such unglamorous terms as Bug Eaters, Iowa had from time to time been called the Cornhuskers, and the name appealed to Sherman. Now, I wanted to put a pin there for a very specific reason. Did we really just say that Iowa had used the name Cornhuskers before Nebraska? Iowa partisans seemed to prefer Hawkeyes, so Sherman started referring to the Nebraska team as Cornhuskers, and the 1900 team was first to bear that label. Of course, the name caught on, and Nebraska became a byword, eventually becoming the official nickname for the state. No official symbol of a Cornhusker, and various cartoonists have characterized the mystical as something that typifies Nebraska football, some winning fan approval and some not so much. Herbie Husker evolved out of Nebraska's trip to the 74 Cotton Bowl in Dallas and such. So there we land currently. Herbie Husker, Nebraska Huskers. We don't necessarily... Nebraska as a state is the Cornhusker state, but the athletic programs live and breathe with Husker. And that's where they stand. It's not old gold knights or men-killing mastodons. We blew it. We missed the opportunity. But I'm slightly saddened by the fact that Iowa also used the term. That's slightly sad. That'll be it for this episode of Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch each and every single day. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. We'll close with the three words we love so much. Go Big Red.